Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to join me on my podcast. I'm really excited.
Sure. And can you tell me a little bit about your podcast? You may have included it in the email, but um, if you could refresh my memory, does it focus on climate change?
Yeah. So it's mostly a climate change podcast. I post it on my YouTube channel called MethaneMatters, which
Right.
is focused on educating people about climate change and methane emissions.
And methane in particular, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unusual for a podcast like this to be that focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have, instead of me asking you a question, and you're in high school in Minneapolis, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. That's great that you're thinking about this at the beginning of your career. So
Yeah.
excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, rather than me asking questions, I suppose the purpose of this is for you to ask me questions.
Yes.
So I'm ready.
Okay, great. So we'll start with introductions. I'll go first, and then you can introduce yourself, and then we'll get into questions that I'll ask you.
Okay.
Okay. Should we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm Ivanka. I'm a high school student from Minnesota, and I'm passionate about climate and sustainability. And I first got interested in methane emissions specifically when I did my research project at the University of Minnesota with Dr. Joe Hoishley. She works for the USDA. And then I also did a research project at Cornell University for a summer. And both of my research projects were in reducing methane emissions from livestock from enteric fermentation. So that's when I realized that methane was such an important greenhouse gas and that no one really focuses on it that much. So I think it's important to educate people about methane emissions. And then that's why I started my initiative, Methane Matters. So I have a YouTube channel with like educational videos and these podcasts. And then I also wrote this book on methane emissions that goes much more into detail on its sources and mitigation strategies and impact.
Who wrote that book?
Me. It's
Oh, you
published
wrote that book.
on Amazon. Yeah.
How do I? It's on Amazon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, I've had like researchers and policymakers and professors on my podcast. And yeah, I'm really excited to have you today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
So shall I introduce myself?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So my name is Rob Stowe. I work at Harvard University, though largely remotely now. So I live in Iowa. I started at Harvard in 2003, and I've been at the Harvard Kennedy School for all of that time. And as you know, but maybe some of your listeners don't know, the Kennedy School is Harvard's graduate school for public policy and public service, offering primarily master's degrees, but having a very small doctoral program as well. During all of that time, I've worked on energy and climate. And since about 2007, I've worked very closely with Professor Robert Stavins, who's an environmental economist.
Okay.
If I may just say a little bit more, about 4 years ago, a man named Jean-Eric Salata and his spouse, Melanie Salata, gave Harvard a very large financial gift to establish a university-wide center on climate change and sustainability, which would serve as a locus for activities throughout the university. and it's known as the Salata Institute for Climate and Sustainability, not surprisingly.
Yeah.
One of the many things the Salata Institute has done is to provide a set of quite large grants to internal groups at Harvard that cut across schools and across disciplines to address important problems with regard to climate change. And there are 8 of these initiatives that have been funded, and we're very fortunate that ours is one of those on methane. So I'm the executive director of the Harvard initiative to reduce global methane emissions.
Okay.
So that is me. I have a PhD in political science from MIT, and so go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So what got you interested in this area of climate?
Well, I've always been interested in the interface between science and public policy and politics. So long time ago, my dissertation was on the interface between agricultural research and foreign aid, foreign development assistance. And since then, I've worked on other issues at the interface between science, public policy, and politics. And then since 2003, it's been pretty much on climate change, which I, along with many others and you understand is just a extremely significant challenge that we face as human beings and as caretakers for this earth.
Yeah. So can you talk about the work that you currently do?
Sure. So our methane initiative at Harvard acts like a foundation itself. So we have been given a grant from the Salata Institute, and then we give grants to research groups at Harvard who are working on methane or want to work on methane. We have done so for approximately 23 projects over the last 2.5 years. And these range from, projects in the natural science, which I can describe, all the way to one project that's in the field of history. So there's a history professor at Harvard who is working with a natural scientist who works on satellite detection of methane emissions to write short histories of super emitting methane sites around the world. So my job as executive director is to identify projects that we might be able to support usefully, and then to work with the participants around Harvard University to make sure that everything's going smoothly, and also, very importantly, to facilitate and implement outreach, so communications about the results of their work. We try to produce research briefs, and we participate in the annual UNFCCC conferences of the parties and in other conferences to communicate what we're doing, what these various research teams are doing on methane at Harvard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to look into methane and do this initiative around methane?
Well, Professor Stavens and I decided for the same reason that you're focusing on methane, which is that it is a very powerful greenhouse gas. As you know, maybe some of your listeners don't, most scientists estimate that about 30% of the warming that's occurred so far is due to methane emissions. And most of the rest is from CO2, but obviously there are a few other greenhouse gases as well. But methane is a really big contributor to the warming that's occurred so far, and to warming that's occurring now and in the future. So it's a big deal in that regard, but also it presents an opportunity, again, as you know, that methane has a very short lifetime in the atmosphere. A half-life of 10 to 20 years, as opposed to CO2, whose half-life is measured in hundreds of years. So if we take methane out of the atmosphere, or if we reduce methane emissions, it'll have an immediate impact on warming and the other damages that result from climate change. So we can have an immediate impact in a big way if we can address methane emissions successfully. There are, in fact, a lot of folks focusing on methane, Ivanka. So I go to the COPs, those annual UN conferences. You know what a COP is, but and also, I've been to the last few climate weeks in New York City and also London. There's a lot of methane going on.
Yeah.
So you and I have a lot of company. But what was I going to say? Where was that leading? So in any case, there's a lot of attention on methane just for the reasons I cited. It has methane emissions are very powerful greenhouse gases, maybe 20 times as powerful or 80 times as powerful, depending on how you count it. I know that's a big range, but depends how you count it. In any case, a lot more powerful than CO2. And then if you reduce emissions, you can really have, I know what I was saying. So all of these groups that are working on methane recently have been taking to refer to reducing methane emissions as pulling the handbrake, pulling the emergency brake on the hurtling train of climate change that's coming down the tracks. There's if you need to stop a vehicle very quickly, there's an emergency brake that you can pull to, have it screech to a halt. So they've been using the metaphor of pulling the emergency brake to refer to, reducing methane emissions significantly. At the most recent COP, which I actually didn't attend, there was a lot about pulling the emergency brake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So can you describe some of the most important projects, or whichever projects you want to talk about, just a few of them more in detail?
Sure. The team that we're working with the most out of those 23 projects, in fact, several of those projects are with this team, is led by Professor Danielle Jacob, who is an atmospheric chemist, although it spills over into physics as well. And he is an expert on detecting methane emissions using satellites.
Okay.
Although he's quick to acknowledge that satellite detection has to be supplemented with airborne and ground-based detection as well to get a really complete picture of the location and magnitude of methane emissions. So we've supported his team. He has a big team of PhD students and postdoctoral fellows working with him on various sub-projects within that broad category. So that's one. There's another research fellow, senior research fellow named Robert Tarlberg, who wrote a paper, did a study on livestock emissions, which is something you know a lot about. And he is a political scientist and has focused on agricultural policy his entire career, different aspects of agricultural policy, but he's looking at methane right now, livestock methane.
Okay.
By the way, he came to the conclusion that the way you can decrease methane emissions in emerging economies, and he did case studies on Brazil and India, most quickly is not through feed additives, but rather through increasing productivity of the animals. So through better veterinary care and through other means, so that you get more food per unit of methane emitted. In other words, yeah, don't need to go into too many more details. So that's an interesting one. Also, since you've worked in the livestock area with regard to methane, we do have, believe it or not, at Harvard, we do have one other agricultural project. There's a team that's working on a new type of wearable sensor for cattle.
Okay.
There are a lot of academic teams and also startup companies working on such detectors, but this is unique in certain ways. First of all, it's patterned on the mammalian sense of smell, so on how our olfactory system works. One of the professors who's guiding this project is a neurophysiologist who's an expert on the sense of smell. So that's being incorporated into the sensor. And then also it's drawing upon the latest understanding in machine learning, so that it can, distinguish the methane emissions from the cow from other, background noise in the area, in the vicinity. So that's an interesting one. So that's 3 or 4.
Yeah, those are really interesting. I also talked to Dr. Desiree Plata from MIT, and she's also doing stuff with sensors. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what international projects do you have? I know you mentioned like the India and Brazil ones. Do you have any more?
We aren't doing too much internationally. We travel internationally to communicate what we're doing, but we're not actually doing much internationally in other countries. Having said that, Professor Jacobs' team has looked at methane initiatives using satellites in Latin America, West Africa, and to some extent China, and has published papers on these regions. Now, my initiative hasn't been involved with all of those projects, but with some of them. We also have an economist who is based at Columbia University who's looking at rice production in China. Did I say she's an economist? And is looking at rice production in China and how this can be managed to, minimize methane emissions. So that's another international one. Those are 2 examples.
Okay. So for most of these projects, do you collaborate with like governments or other agencies, or like who do you work with to make this stuff happen?
Well, my initiative is specifically intended to support people within Harvard, within Harvard University. So we certainly talk a lot with external organizations and experts and other NGOs and other universities, not so much government, but some. But we don't, and the individual faculty members, may have their own relationships with other organizations. But none of that is likely to be in the form of a formal memorandum of agreement, for example. It's more informal collaboration. We just traveled to Sao Paulo, Brazil, to do a workshop on methane. My team wasn't able to go to the COP this year because it was somebody else's turn at Harvard to do that, which is fair. But we kind of instead, we did this workshop in Sao Paulo just a week ago or so, maybe a little bit more now. And part of that was having a conversation kind of a side conversation with some people working with the government on reducing emissions. And as um, you know, livestock is the biggest source of methane emissions in Brazil. So, that's certainly has to be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some challenges you face in doing these projects?
Well, I guess the biggest challenge is finding, I keep looking for more people that might be interested in methane, but there are only so many. So that's a challenge. Folks at a big university, a big research university like Harvard it's not just Harvard, any research university are going to be pretty self-motivated. So it's not like I need to do anything to make sure the project gets finished. So there aren't any challenges in that sense. I guess the challenge that I think about most is really communicating well, and working with experts in outreach and communications and publicity to make sure that what we do is conveyed to other organizations that are working on methane, not just published in scientific journals, although that's important, obviously, but beyond that, communicated to a wider sphere of public policy actors.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
So are most of your projects funded by NGOs or something?
Well, the projects that I work with are all funded by the Salada Institute.
Okay.
And which is this cross-university new institute that I spoke about earlier. And they in turn got their money from the Saladas.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we're funded.
Okay.
We don't have any, at least in our methane initiative, we don't have any external funding now, nor do we need to, frankly. I mean, at some point we may look for some external funding, but don't have to right now. We're fortunate in that regard.
Okay, yeah. So I know you talked about all the people that you collaborate with. Who all is in your team specifically?
I'm sorry, Ivanka, say that again.
So I know you talked about people who you collaborate with on like the different projects and stuff, but who all is in your team specifically?
Who is on our team specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, our core team?
Yeah.
Yeah, our core methane team is just a couple of people.
Okay.
So we have a team of 4 people. So myself, Professor Robert Stavens, whom I mentioned, who's our director, and my colleague and friend Jason Chapman, who handles all of the management of this initiative, and we have a couple of other things that we're doing too besides methane.
Okay.
And we have a support person as well, and that's it. Yeah. So it's a very small group. Now, from depending on the situation, we may work very closely with other people, almost all of whom who are working in one of those projects that we're supporting. So for example, in Sao Paulo, just a week and a half ago, we traveled there with Danielle Jacob, whom I've mentioned a couple of times, and who's kind of the 5th person on our team in a way, and also one of his graduate students.
Okay. So you also work with undergraduate or graduate students?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes we need research assistance, but certainly the projects that we support, draw upon research assistants, some of whom are indeed undergraduates.
Okay.
Our own core team doesn't need that so much, but certainly a big part of what we do is intended to engage students, both graduate students and undergraduates where possible. And the broader Salada Institute, which does a lot of things besides these big university-wide initiatives, has quite a number of undergraduate research assistants or people, students who are working in other roles. Also, one thing the Salada Institute has done, this isn't particularly on methane, but has made it possible for more students to go to the conferences of the parties. Like there are several students from Harvard who went to Belém, last month, and supported in part by the Salada Institute.
Okay.
So it's helping students in that way as well. The Salada Institute is also puts on this relatively new Climate Week at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Have you been to the Climate Week in New York?
I have not.
Not yet. Okay. That's a great thing to do, by the way. There's so much going on climate change and methane in particular, actually. So if you have a chance to go, it would be, where are we? It would be next September now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth it. In any case, what was I saying about students? Anyway, the Salada Institute is helping students really get engaged in many ways. Oh, we have a Climate Week at Harvard now, which is terrific, and is also in September. I think it's been held 3 times, and it's always the week before Climate Week in New York City, so that it's easy for people to go to both. A lot of external people from outside Harvard do come to our Climate Week as well.
Okay. That's cool. So do you also teach any courses at Harvard?
Not now, no. I'm not a professor, first of all. I'm on staff, okay? So having said that, I taught for several years in the teens, the late 20-teens, of course, on the history of the UNFCCC process and drawing upon international relations theory, and a couple of other courses, but I don't teach now.
Okay. So to join your group or one of your projects, what kind of skills or experience do you think one should have?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to extend that to working on methane in general.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to answer that question for my initiative in particular, because we would draw on faculty or students or research fellows who are at Harvard. So the first thing you need to do is get into Harvard in one way or another. But more broadly, if you want to work on methane, there are a number of avenues. Obviously, science is one avenue. And there's a lot of research that we still need to do on the nature of methane emissions and how to reduce them. There's the advocacy route, so advocating for public policy and also action from other sectors of society to do something about methane emissions. And that takes a certain personality and inclination to be an advocate, an effective advocate. And usually such a person would work for an NGO of some kind or another, right?
Okay.
Though not necessarily. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in business. So one of our projects at Harvard is convening entrepreneurs who have started businesses that are intended to deploy a new technology or a new software platform or something to help reduce methane emissions. So you could be a business person, an entrepreneur, who wanted to apply your startup skills to methane.
Okay.
And in fact, there are a couple of different venture capital firms that I've run into who kind of concentrate on methane, not just climate change and sustainability, but methane in particular. And One in particular is Overview Capital. You can Google it, Overview Capital, and based in New York City is one of those. So those are some of the avenues that you can take to, to take part in this space.
Okay. Yeah.
What is your own? What fields or academic areas are you interested in?
I think I want to go into environmental engineering, or I'm a research scientist or something like that.
Right. That's a great way to go. Are you a junior now or a senior?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior, and it's December. Oh, so have you sent in all your applications?
I've sent in some.
Some.
Yeah.
I see. So you're going to be busy the rest of the month, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm starting to ask you questions now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think should be done to mitigate methane emissions across the world? And what sectors do you think are doing good at this?
Good question. And so first of all, the sectors that emit methane are very different from one another. And so there are different solutions that apply in the various sectors. There are four main sectors where methane emissions come from. One is oil and gas production and transportation. Another is livestock, mainly cattle, but not only cattle. Third is waste and landfills. And another is rice production, which is also in the broad agricultural area, but it's quite different from cattle production, right? So I usually categorize it as a separate sector.
Okay.
And then finally, one area that's big in some parts of the world is coal production. There's methane gets produced in the process, gets released in the process of mining coal in some cases. And that's primarily a problem in China. Okay. So those are the different sectors that produce methane. The area that is easiest to address is oil and gas production, because the leaks are, relatively easy to find using handheld detectors, airborne detectors, or if you need them, satellites as well, and relatively easy to address. Sometimes it's as simple as, tightening a bolt on a pump, I'm exaggerating a bit, but there are, mechanical and, maintenance related fixes to reducing the emissions. But maybe some of your listeners don't know that natural gas is mostly methane.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when we're talking about methane in the oil and gas sector, we're talking about the gas, the natural gas, which to a close approximation is methane. And you want to keep it from leaking into the atmosphere. And it's relatively easy to do. So then the other sectors get progressively more difficult. You have waste and landfills, which we know how to deal with. I mean, what you want to do is capture the gas that's being emitted from the landfill and then use it for some productive purpose. Once you burn the natural gas, whether it's in a stove or, in a furnace in your home like that, it turns into CO2 and other gases for the most part. Now, CO2 is still a greenhouse gas and causes warming, right? Climate change, but it's not as powerful as methane. So that's a net gain for you. But you don't want the methane from the landfill to go directly into the atmosphere if you can avoid it. The other way to address emissions from landfills is to keep food from going into the landfill in the first place. So what causes the methane from a landfill is the organic waste, which means mostly food. So it's the organic waste that goes into the landfill that causes the methane emissions. Methane gets created when you have organic material that decomposes in the absence of oxygen. And it decomposes in a different way when there's no oxygen available. In other words, for example, if it's buried in a landfill and produces methane during that process. So it's interesting, you know, methane in land, whether it's landfills, rice, cattle, at least those three, you know, gets produced by the decomposition of organic matter in the absence of oxygen.
Yeah.
So it's anaerobic digestion. Even natural gas, I mean, millions and millions of years ago, a lot of that, not all of it, got produced by plants decaying, you know, when they were buried.
Mm-hmm.
So that some of that was produced by anaerobic digestion as well. Coal is a little bit different story.
Okay.
So anyway, the bottom line is that you need different strategies for the different sectors. You know, there's not too much that cuts across all the sectors very effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's just one last question I have.
Sure.
What advice do you have for high schoolers or anyone who's interested in the climate space?
Just pursue your passion, you know, and don't think too much about where it's going to end up, but pursue your passion. You know, study what you enjoy studying, whether it's social sciences, economics, or physics, or political science. At the same time, keep your options open. You know, don't try not to lock yourself in too early, you know, to a particular career path, because you don't know where the opportunities are going to be 4 years from now or 6 years from now or whatever.
Yeah.
And even early on, I mean, you're exceptional. You're in high school and you're doing this, but not everyone is quite that far along. But network like crazy, you know, try to talk to a lot of people.
Okay.
Who are working in the field of climate, various aspects of climate change. Just talk to a lot of people and, you know, develop relationships, and those will, I mean, you want to do that just because you're interested in what other people are doing, but also it's helpful to you to have that network later on when you're, you know, looking for a job that you would find valuable and useful and inspiring to have that network available to you. So just to the extent that you can, and that means you, meaning all people who are early in their career, just network like crazy and get on LinkedIn, which is important in my personal view. But you know, that's not the only way to proceed, but it is one important way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, your work sounds super exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have our website?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if in your podcast, well, it's a podcast, so it's not video, but anyway.
Well, I'm posting it on YouTube, so they'll watch it on video.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Okay.
Now let's see if I can get back to where I was. So how do you? Oh, here it is. So there's our homepage for our methane initiative, and I encourage, you know, people watching this to explore our website. There are a lot of publications there. There are articles about events that we've done, panels that we've done around the world. So, you know, spend some time there.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description.
Okay.